Hello everyone, you are all very welcome to today's client experience webinar on building a future ready legal function. We're delighted that you can join us today. Irrespective of whether it's your first time joining us today or you've been with us right from the very beginning, you're very welcome to this community of over 4,500 General Counsel and in-house legal team members around the world. Today's session is the second session in our new series, which is running between now and March of next year. Before we get into today's topic, we do have an exciting little announcement for you all. So Natalie, if you could turn to the next page, we are running a bonus session for everyone on this community, and that's going to take place on Tuesday, the 2nd of December. The session will be with our own global CEO, Kate Barton, and Tasu Sharvani, and we are going to, at a perfect time of year for this, look at strategic insights and perspectives into 2026 with a focus on the macroeconomic forces reshaping global business, and also look at the insights and strategies that you can look at this point in the year to future-proof your organization into next year and beyond. So Joanna's going to pop the registration link into the chat, and we'd love you if you could join us at this session. So let's turn to today's topic. As General Counsel and in-house legal team members, many of you on today's call are already proactively influencing business strategy and driving commercial outcomes. You're anticipating rather than simply mitigating risk and reacting to issues. But to continue to deliver this level of business value in the face of what we know is ever-increasing complexity and change, you need to build a fit for the future legal function. And that's exactly where the focus is for the next 60 minutes. As always, these sessions are always about you and what you get out of it. And we're really keen for you to get the most from today's webinar in terms of practical takeaways. So I encourage you to make the most of the chat and the messaging functions as we work through today's discussion. So let's get started. I'm excited to hand you over to my colleague on the Client Experience Programme team here at Dentons, Joanne Wakeford, who will introduce you to our fantastic panel for today and lead you through today's session. We hope you get value from it.
Thank you, Niamh. Welcome, everyone. Good to see so many people today. As Niamh said, whether it's your first or your second of this series, we're excited to have you join us. My name is Joanne Wakeford. I'm our Director of Global Client Engagement and Communications at Dentons, and I am facilitating the conversation today between two incredible speakers. We had a chance to hear from them in the session earlier today. Bindu and Helen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Bindu, do you want to do a brief intro of yourself, please?
Great. Thank you so much, Joanne, Niamh, Natalie, and the Dentons team for having me today. My name's Bindu Cudjoe, and I have been at the General Counsel at a couple of different banks, as well as a Deputy General Counsel at a larger bank. I've also been the Chief Compliance Officer, Chief Ethics Officer, Chief Privacy, Chief Inclusion Officer. So I've had a variety of roles working in financial institutions, and I'm delighted to be able to bring some insights from my time there. I've also been a partner at a law firm, and I've served on a number of different boards as a director, chair, committee chair, etc. So really pleased to be here. Currently, I am consulting and supporting law firms and organizations on risk and governance and for law firms' business growth. So thanks so much.
Tons of experience, as you can see. Helen, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Joanne and team. I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Helen. I am currently a partner at Dentons. I lead our franchise and distribution group globally, and I'm the national lead of our retail and consumer products practice as well. Prior to that, I spent a number of years in-house as well, and I've kind of fluctuated back and forth between in-house and private practice over the course of my career. Started off as a litigator, which was super exciting, moved in-house for a multinational corporation as one of their very early GCs, which was thrilling to do, and very much involved building a law department because there wasn't one there previously, which is always shocking to me when you kind of peel the curtain back and realize how lean some corporations operate. Most recently, I'm back in private practice where I have an opportunity to kind of bring some of my in-house experience to Dentons and structure programs and service offerings that resonate with in-house clients and deliver value. So it's a perfect mix of my experience. Really excited to dive into these issues today.
Thanks, Helen. I've had the chance of working with Bindu and Helen for many years, so I can assure you this is going to be a very detailed and in-depth conversation. Before we start, as we like to do with our CX programs, let's start with a poll question, just to get a sense of where everyone is at in terms of how you're evolving your legal function, and really would like to know from you what your biggest challenge might be currently in evolving your function to be future ready. Is it a limited budget or resources? Perhaps it's resistance to change, which is always a tough one. Struggling with new technology and trying to get people to adopt it rather. Are there some skill gaps across the team? We're going to talk about skills today. It's an important element of building the future legal function, but is that core legal expertise, or maybe that's performance skills such as strategic thinking or leadership? Of course, lots of great stuff that we talk about on the CX program here. If it's anything else, let us know in the chat. And we also have a second question we'd love your feedback on. Which area do you believe will have the greatest impact in transforming your function over the next 2 years? Is that AI and automation? Is it functional collaboration across different groups within your organization? Is it upskilling your talent, maybe getting more data to get better access to making those data-driven decisions, or anything else? Please let us know in the chat. So, and as we wait for, I think we've got about 60% participation so far. We'll just give it a few more seconds to get those votes in. But just remind everyone, welcome you to put questions in the chat. We'll try to monitor that as best we can. We hope to have time at the end for questions. We have a very robust program today, so we're going to launch right into it after we share these responses. Niamh, how are we doing for responses?
We are doing really well. It's lovely to see everyone getting involved so early. So we're heading towards the 70% mark now. This is the second of these sessions that we've run, and the results are pretty consistent to the first session. So let's just do a quick 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on this one. We're going to end the poll and share the results with you all.
Great. So almost identical to the session earlier today or last night. Limited budget or resources. I suppose no one is really surprised by that. Interesting to see that the performance skills is an area where there's a challenge and opportunity to grow there. And of course, AI and automation, we know definitely going to have an impact. So great to see. And also great to share with you that we're definitely going to cover a lot of these topics in our conversation today. So let's dive in if we can. Niamh, if you take us to the next slide, please. So I think there's definitely a shift happening that's driving some of today's conversation, right? And the need for you to be building that future legal department. We know that in-house teams are, being increasingly expected to act like a business person first and a lawyer second, or a business leader who happens to also be a legal leader. And there are definitely forces that I think are driving that are, requiring you to look at change across your function. One of which I think is some great statistics from the ACC Chief Legal Officer Survey from 2025. CLOs are increasingly asked to be taking on new functional areas outside of legal. That includes risk, compliance, privacy, even corporate affairs and real estate. So lots of new work coming at. And also, more involvement in things like M&A and other corporate transactions as the scope expands to be more business focused. And of course, as a result, so too does that of our teams. And providing that business strategy and advice has become a really fast growing area of demand for in-house legal services. And of course, there's external factors driving that as well, like the increasing complexity of work translates to you having to provide more strategic guidance to navigate complex regulations, maybe during times of ambiguity. And of course, there's cost pressures, which I haven't listed here, but clearly relevant to everyone here on the call, at least 50% of you. But it's requiring you to have a more commercial mindset and focus more on efficiency and rethink how things are being done. So if we pop to the next slide, for today's conversation, we are going to focus in on something called the 7S Framework by McKinsey. So it was originally developed by McKinsey & Company. The 7S model itself provides a really holistic view of how to create effectiveness with your organization by looking at 7 different but interdependent elements. So there's strategy, structure, systems, shared values, style, staff, and skills, lots of S's. And each S is a critical lever. And by looking at all of these different elements together, you can begin to identify some gaps, you can align your priorities, and you can ultimately design a future-ready legal function, right? So, in the context of looking at this transformation within your legal function, this kind of framework is really good because it can help to break down traditional silos when you think about how legal services are delivered, how talent is developed, how culture and values shape decision making. And the reality is how each of those are so interconnected. When you pull one lever, that impacts another. So we're really excited to be able to dive in, but we've actually added another element. So if Natalie, just click to the next element. One piece that we feel is particularly worthwhile calling out, not part of the original model per se, is that of spend or budget. And certainly, as 50% of you have indicated, that is a challenge. And so we want to talk a little bit today as well about how to come up and how to secure budget for any of these plans that you may have. Okay, we're going to dive into it because we have a ton of content to get through. So let's get to the next slide. And we're going to focus first on strategy. We all know how important and essential it is for the law department to be in line with the corporate strategy. But what does that mean in terms of practical terms? And it can be a challenge if the relationships aren't there. But let's dive into it. Helen, what are your thoughts on how you can build that greater alignment with the business?
Thanks, Joanne. I think absolutely the first place to start is with the business itself and not with the law. You have to understand your business, where it is today, both its strengths, its weaknesses, opportunities, where it's going, and then ultimately where it wants to be in the future. You need to understand your industry. You need to understand what your competitors are doing, what they're not doing. And then once you have that kind of macro vision, I would say you can then start to map the business priorities against what your legal priorities will be for your department. And I'll say that, and that's not static either. So you kind of start with a macro skeleton, if you will. And then from there, step 2, in my view, is you want to start to deepen that alignment. And the way to do that, I think, is to start building relationships. So get to know your colleagues in the business units, ask them what they're doing, ask them what they're working on, understand what their initiatives and priorities are, ask to sit in on one of their team or group meetings to understand what they're working towards. That'll allow you to further tweak your priorities and deepen your alignment. I think effectively what you want to do is become a true part of the team, right? Be integrated in the team. That means park the legalese, speak the language of the business, I would say, and learn to present the legal function in business terms that'll resonate with your colleagues as well. And it's not, it's a little unorthodox, perhaps, and maybe it's becoming more common. I hope it is, but I would say as a former GC, prepare a business plan for your legal department and use the same KPI and metrics that your business colleagues will use. So, the goal of the legal department this year is we're looking to, increase revenue by 20%, enhance our customer confidence, reduce our legal spend, whatever objectives you want to set for the legal department. Set those at the outset. And you could say the way we're going, taking the first one as an example, we're looking to increase revenue. So I practice in franchising and distribution. So I say the way we're going to do that is we're partnering with our dealer development team to increase franchisee recruitment and improve our speed to contracting in order to get additional units open, which will increase revenue for the company through additional franchise fees and increased product sales, service sales, whatever. And so that way you've integrated your team member, you've set out your priorities for the legal department that align with the goals of the business department. You're deepening your connection to the group. You're becoming an ally and a resource for your colleagues in the business units, which is critical. And then the final step, I would say, is demonstrate your value, right? So it has to come full circle, and don't be shy. Legal lawyers are sometimes a little timid about coming across too arrogant or too cocky or, to, know-it-alls or whatever, but you're part of that team and you want to demonstrate that you're contributing in a meaningful way. So once you've set out your plan at the outset, at the end of the year, you want to demonstrate we've achieved our objective of increasing revenue. Here's how we did it. And you need to measure and report that contribution to demonstrate your true value. Once you do that, your credibility increases, your alignment with the business increases, and the way business is perceived, the way legal is perceived by the business similarly improves. So it's a full circle strategy and really trying to align with the business both literally and figuratively, I think. So that would be my suggestion.
I'm very passionate about the topic of demonstrating value for sure. And I know we're going to talk to you a couple of times, but Bindu, you talk a little bit about not being a special guest. I know you'll have views on this as well.
Absolutely. I, of course, agree with everything that Helen has said. And I think really part of embedding yourself in the strategy and being part of it is very much going to be driven by your ability to be part of the team. And so by that, I say part of the family, not a special guest. Don't just, pitch it into a meeting, once a quarter or once a year and just present on legal issues, but rather be there with them. And that means sometimes getting into the dysfunction of the team and understanding the politics of the team and who's driving things, who's influencing things, who are stopping things, and using, I think, the great sort of critical thinking and analysis that we have as lawyers to understand the dynamics of the team and really to kind of feed into, as Helen said, the business and the strategy. I think one useful thing you can think about as an in-house leader is who are you spending some of your time with, maybe outside of your day job, in that it's really easy and wonderful, like to join communities like this where you're surrounded by other lawyers. But, as we think about future-proofing your legal department and really helping drive forward the strategy of the company, it's our ability sometimes as lawyers to look around corners. So are you going to industry conferences? Are you interacting with perhaps your peers and in competitors or in similar sectors and seeing how they're addressing the challenges? I think it's also an inherent part of our job is to sort of look forward to regulatory change, governmental change. I know in Canada, for example, a new budget was released or issued. And so how can you advise your company, your business about the implications of what's around the corner, what's coming up? And I think that's where you start to really dig into the language of the business, the things that are going to impact them, and it really enhances your impact. So, this is where you're not just coming in to do a presentation on a legal issue, but rather you're there with them thinking about and helping us imagine a future together. So I think that's really vital.
One of the things I like to suggest is actually being programmatic about it. Like actually write down a list of people that internally that you need to connect with, make a plan, put a schedule in, and stick to it, because we get so busy with the day-to-day that sometimes these things, we have to push meetings or what have you. So I think it's good to be actually schedule it in. Now, Bindu, let's talk a little bit about mapping risk against strategy and how to understand where to look for those potential potholes.
For sure. I think our training, our inclination, and sometimes we feel like our role is to spot all the risks. And there are lots of them, absolutely. Risk taking is part of revenue generation, right? And you're trying to mitigate certain risks, or you're choosing to take specific risks, perhaps to enter a niche market or a different geography. So looking at where the strategy is going and how those risks map up against it. I think it's our job primarily as lawyers to help figure out the best way to tackle those risks and to also size those risks. Not all risks have the same likelihood of outcome. They don't all have the same impact. They're not all likely to happen. And so, let's not we're not going to get points, and we're not going to win the contest if we can identify the most problems and the most issues with and red flags and throw things on the play. I don't know, that's a sports analogy. I can't end it, but no one's going to win by doing that. No one's going to be invited to be part of the family if all you're doing is moaning about what could go wrong, but rather, how are we going to get through this? How are we going to be prepared if that happens? Why do we think that that's an unlikely risk to happen? And I think our colleagues really do look for us because they know that we have this really amazing role where we can have a bird's eye view of the organization, right? We're not just looking at the one product that this team is selling, or the one slice of the organization or the business that your colleagues are in, but rather you have that sort of aggregate high level bird's eye view. So use it, right? Don't get lost in the weeds, in the trees, but stay at the forest level in the right forums. And then sometimes we do have to get right into the nitty gritty, but I think being able to kind of come out and then go back in is one of the things that are very unique about our training. And I think we don't always do the zoom out part of what we can do.
And that, imagine the dots you can connect to in that role, right? If you do have the bird's eye view, that the role that you can play as that sort of facilitator and cross-functional collaborator.
I just want to say one thing really quickly just on that. I think that's key, like the calibration of your intervention is critical, right? So you want to, I think as lawyers, it's our obligation, you want to make the risk visible, but calibrate it. Visible and actionable is the key thing, right? So you don't want to be the Department of No and all of these other titles that are often allotted to deal, but you want to be you want to be a facilitator. So calibration, I think, is key, and and just actionable. That way you're adding value and you're encouraging your colleagues to seek your opinion and advice and guidance on these things, as opposed to being afraid to letting until the very end when it's way too late.
So strategy is a foundational element. We're going to move now to talk about style and shared values. We've for the purpose of today, have combined some of these elements to get through it in 60 minutes. But this is a really important, again, foundational point, because I think, as you want to focus on building the future legal function, that requires perhaps a mindset shift for some people on the team, right? Thinking about how are we becoming business enablers? How do we create an opportunity to empower others on our team. And Bindu, one of the conversations we've had, and I've certainly heard from others, is this dynamic of how do you refer to your internal business unit leads that you work with? To whom you deliver legal services? Are they colleagues or are they clients? What's your view on that one?
I feel very strongly they're your colleagues, not your clients. We have one client. It's the organization that you work for. Everybody else is a colleague. We're in it together. And I think that's kind of that family dynamic. We're going through this together. And whether it's through good times or bad times, whether we're winning, whether, we're suffering a loss, we're in this together. We all have different roles sometimes in the successes and sometimes the cleanup. Legal is sometimes cleanup on aisle 5. But you know what? There's, as one knows in a family, there's no value in the I told you so, but rather let's learn from what we've gone through and how do we do this differently and better the next time. We're trying to figure out, we're facing headwinds, we're facing risks. We don't know what's happening with tariffs. We don't know what's happening with budgets, but how are we going to, come back to our shared values and develop kind of the resilience within the team to rely on each other, to trust each other, to push each other at times, that effective challenge. Those things only happen when you create sort of the context of trust. So I think, again, it's where when you're close with your colleagues in the business and you are, sitting together and being together, working through issues together, working through successes and initiatives and all the positive things. When you're there in the good times and the bad times, that's where you really lean into that colleague piece. And you're able to kind of focus on, the as you've put really beautifully on the slide, as the sense of purpose, right? Like, why are we doing this? Who are we striving to serve? Who are our clients? Who are our customers? Who's relying on us to deliver what we say that we're going to be able to deliver?
Yeah, exactly. Helen, I know you've got lots to say as well on culture.
Yeah.
Did you want to jump in with some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I would echo everything Bindu said, and I would say culture and shifting to this collective growth mindset is your strategy in motion, right? And it'll be your greatest predictor of success. I think if you're able to form a legal department and a larger business with your colleagues that is centered around that collective growth mindset, you're going to achieve great things. And that requires a shift in the way, both internally, the way legal is perceived and the way business is perceived, from defining or maybe redefining what the legal function is. And it may sound cheesy, right? But maybe go through the exercise of creating a bit of a mission statement for your team, or what's your purpose? Like, we exist to facilitate growth in a responsible manner, or whatever your raison d'etre is, right? Understand that. Once your team understands their why and their purpose, they're going to make better decisions. They're gonna act faster with more confidence. And I guarantee you, when people feel like they're a part of a larger group, something bigger than just themselves, you're going to see a spike in integration, a spike in engagement, a spike in confidence, a spike in contribution. It's the best way to poach proof your team, I think. So
Yeah.
it's I can't highlight how important that is in my mind. And
One
I
of
think
the
there's
banks, I'll give an, sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Benji. Sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the banks that I worked for, our collective team's mission was to serve our customers and protect the bank. And I think the order of our mission was really important, because it was a focus first on customers and second the bank. And I will tell you, it was heavily debated. There were a lot of people in our function, we were legal and compliance, who really felt that the protect the bank piece had to be front and
First, yeah.
center. And I think, but it led to a really great discussion that kind of unpacked some of the values that people were holding and assumptions that people were making, but also to allow for us to have a really good debate about it. And I'm sure if our business colleagues had seen us debating this, they would have thought that was, quite navel gazing of us. But it was deeply important, right, to kind of shift our approach to the work to drive to meet the needs of our customers and our clients, and to support our colleagues better, right? Because we were focused. It's part of our mandate, but it wasn't the first priority of our mandate to protect and to retrench, right, and to hold back from taking risk.
I think that one of the important elements of all of that, what you've both just described, is having that strategic vision, or the opportunities, or finding the time to think strategically. And we don't just put that in our calendar between 12 and 1 p.m. I'm going to think strategically today. But it's not that easy to be done. So I think it takes practice, it takes effort. But Bindu, I know you've got a couple of thoughts on this as well, or some ideas.
Yeah, I think you don't get to being a strategic thinker by just, reading a book and deciding you're going to do it. You have to practice it. And so I think, and Helen, I know you've talked about a few of these, is creating the environments and the forums where we can do this. So, you can think about addressing a hypothetical scenario. So perhaps there's some cautionary tale from a competitor in the industry of them having something happen that, you can know about in a public way or otherwise. Work through, how would we react to that? Learning from the things that we've already gone through, like what did we do well? Like, I think the post-implementation review is often a lost opportunity. We don't take the time to look back at what we just went through, what just happened, did it go well, what could we do better, how can we strengthen our processes? We're usually so busy getting on to the next thing, but if we don't learn from the lessons of the past, we will likely repeat them. I think, the activity of mapping, right? So here's the strategy, the corporate strategy, the organizational strategy that's been set. Like, how do we feed into this as the legal department? What are the things that we do in our day-to-day that drive that? And what could we do differently? What could we do less of? Are we actually doing things that are driving the strategy of the bank? There's going to be some pieces around growth, but there's also going to be some pieces around sustaining. Are we using our limited resources and limited budget in the most efficient way? And I think that takes more than, it's not independent thought. It actually requires the group to come together, different minds, different perspectives, and creating a culture where people are open to. I think also taking maybe the strategy of the legal group and road testing that with your colleagues is also important to get feedback. Does that resonate for them? Do they see more links, better ways for us to connect in perhaps with their teams or the work that they're doing, or for us to create shared priorities or shared goals or objectives. So I think there's mapping the strategy, practicing, it's all really a key part of, creating a style and a way of working that, ties into our values and makes the strategy just part of something we do every day.
I just dropped a link in the chat. I came across an interesting article recently in Harvard Business Review, so feel free to explore that. But let's move on to structure. This has been a really helpful sort of foundational conversation. And I think, a lot of the times we might look at structure first without thinking about the other two elements that we just discussed, which I think is important. But it can be difficult to understand, whether or not your existing structure is fit for purpose. What skills might we need? How should we be aligned? And I think, let's dive into a conversation around what might be the best answer to all of that. And Helen, I think you have a great response, which I can see on the screen already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a classic lawyer response, right? What's the best structure? It depends, right? And the reason I say that is because it really does depend. There is no one perfect structure, one size fits all formula that we can all, leave today with and implement immediately. The best structure in my mind, in my view, is the structure that aligns with the business's priorities. And that's going to evolve. So your structure is not going to be static. You want it to be agile, because in order to get back to our earlier point, we're looking for alignment, right? The business priorities change year to year, month to month, day to day sometimes, right? So you need to have that flexibility. So I think when you're looking at structuring your department, your strategy, your systems, your talent pool, all of that, you need to build in a little lax and flex so that you can move with the business, evolve with the business and the priorities as those shift, right? But we're here today to figure out how to build structure. So I'm going to try and offer some valuable tips that you can maybe take away. So we're getting back, and I'm going to be a bit of a broken record today, but you're going to get back to business priorities, understanding the business priorities. What are they working on? Are you entering a new market? Are you launching a new product? Are you downsizing? Are you prepping for a IPO? Whatever the situation is, understand that is step one. Then from there, do a diagnostic, understand what your legal department is looking like. Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the overlaps? Where are the redundancies? What things need to be tweaked? And then in terms of how you organize that, there's a number of ways to do it. So we have on the screen, you can organize by business line, or you can organize by legal expertise. Both can work. There's pros and cons to both. Organizing by business line maybe encourages a little more integration with your colleagues. You're more aligned, maybe it allows for greater collaboration. Legal expertise and clear. Personally, I tend to fall on the side of kind of clear lines of responsibility. I like that. And the reason I like that is because in my mind, structure is not so much about reporting lines, but about how information flows through the organization. So I like to have a clear map and a clear pathway of where I need to go to get the information I need in order to facilitate quick decisions, informed decisions that'll let me make the best strategic decision for the business. And in my mind, I like, that's what resonates with me. But you can tweak that, and for certain projects, it may be organized by a business. In other instances, it might be cleaner. But the goal is always to ensure you're creating a structure that allows for clear pathways and quick access to the information you need to make smart decisions.
Might chime in there and say,
Yeah.
Picking up on the question or the thought that you threw into the chat, Joanne, I think, making sure you have an understanding of what your colleagues in the organization believe the function of legal is and what lawyers do and how they do it. I think is really important, because it may or may not line up with what you think the legal department should be doing, or what your team should be doing, or your colleagues should be doing. So if there is a gap between those two, you've got to figure out how to bridge it. I would also offer a couple of other thoughts for when to think about as you're conducting your diagnostic of kind of what's in the legal team, or what your team is doing. Also think about what you're sending external and what you're paying other people to do, because that is part of the legal work of the organization. And you've chosen to date to resource it in a particular way with external and internal. Does that make sense? Or should some of that external work become internal and the expertise of the team? Are there things that are internal that really should be going outside to another party, or maybe going outside of the legal team into the business? Working in a bank, obviously there's a lot. I mean, everything we do is we sell a contract, which arguably is all legal, but legal isn't involved in every single contract that we sell. So, we've got procurement teams, we've got documentation teams in the business. We have, client center resource, like client team resource centers that have tons of resources that, arguably get towards, their advisory. So how does legal interface? So I think just kind of looking very broadly at how legal is deployed and used is really important for you to understand kind of maybe some benchmarks. There are lots of benchmarking surveys for one to reach out to if you're sort of wanting to think about where you sit. And I would also urge people to think about, sort of how your team, and I agree with Helen in organizing by business line. How many resources do you have in the team mapped against a particular business? It's not going to be a one-for-one thing, obviously. And you may find, in the structure that you inherit or that you're starting with, or that where you're at right now, that you've got you've got a lot of colleagues in one particular business. Maybe it's because of the complexity of it, the legal complexity, the regulatory risk that associates with it. You may have fewer colleagues in another. And I think there's always a moment in time for you to show your strategy as a leader to make sure that makes sense. Is that the right decision in this moment? And I would echo Helen's comments that, what is the right structure for today may not be the right structure for tomorrow. I would urge you to think about who's in your team. Is it all lawyers? Is it other kinds of professionals that you need to have as part of your team? Are there ways for you to share resources across departments and other functions? So just, really thinking about structure very broadly and being open-minded and maybe critical of where you're at right now as a way to road test and sort of push, to where the department needs to be as you are addressing challenges. And then the last piece, because I'm sure we're over time on this, Joanne, is if to the extent that you can, and I will fully admit this is often more aspirational than achievable in my experience, to build some time in, as Helen said, for Slack, to build into job functions and roles some capacity for all the new stuff, good and bad, that comes up over the course of a year. If people are kind of mapped to 100% capacity, it doesn't allow for you. Then things have to get pushed off the desk in order to take something new. But we all know something new is going to happen. Good, bad, or ugly, something new is going to happen in the year. And, do we have particular individuals who we create capacity? Are there particular teams where we create capacity, where we foresee, perhaps a bit more ebb and flow of the work? But if we can at least start the organization with that, I think it might be aspirational, but at least our intentions were good, even if it didn't happen in reality.
All right, thank you so much, Bindu and Helen. Let's move on to systems, because you're right, we have several more to cover. And I think this is, we can't talk about structure or people without thinking about systems, but I think we'll just spend maybe just 2 minutes if we can on this point. I just want to flag for everybody as well that we have a session entirely devoted to this topic on January 29th. Welcome you to sign up if you haven't already to understand how to build out your tech roadmap. But Bindu, do you want to just give us, the 90-second pitch for your view and experience with systems?
Yeah. Before you choose a technology, understand the process that you're trying to either replace or interfere with or supplement. And I think too often we pick a technology. Sometimes we pick technologies that are highly customizable, and then we customize to what is a really sort of messy or broken process. So I think start first with what is it that you're doing? What's the workflow looking like? How's the contract process working? Who's involved in reviewing and approvals? Like, clean that up, make that tight before you choose a technology. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them that are great. We can get really caught up in figuring out which system and how are they going to integrate into our technology. But I would say 90% of your work, maybe 80, needs to be in the what exactly are you using the technology to do, and how does it, what's the underlying system or process that is there.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the brevity. All right, let's move on to the next S, which is skills. And I think, and staff, of course. And I think the interesting thing about this is that perhaps the skills of today might not be what they were yesterday. Helen, I know you have some views on how to fill the gaps.
Yeah, I think for sure there's changes, and when you highlighted them right at the outset when you were saying more and more in-house counsel are expected to be business advisors and engage in multiple streams of the business. And I was actually encouraged to see that stat, because I think it's definitely the direction we're going in terms of what the lawyer of the future will look like, and what new lawyers will need to be equipped to do. But the one thing I would say is don't start with the org chart necessarily, right? It's always a surprise to me how lean some multinational corporations are. You're expecting to see a team of 20, 30 people, and you get in, you start working with a client and you realize they're a team of 2 or 3 or 5. So the org chart isn't necessarily predictive of how your department will run, how well it will run. So again, you need to start back at the business strategies, because strategy, purpose, those things will dictate what your staffing and talent pool will look like, just similar as it will inform your systems and as it informs your structure. These things, as we said, they all kind of layer into one another and kind of live organically, ebb and flow together. So you have to understand that. Again, you need to look at where the business is today when you're looking at staffing, and understand where it's going tomorrow. What will the business need or require from the legal department in 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? So you can't look at where the business is or where it's been. You have to be looking at where it's going. And then ask yourself, once you understand that, what new capabilities do I need to plug into our legal team in light of these new priorities and these new objectives of the business? And then assess, does my team have those capabilities? And it's not about rushing out and hiring the most talented person, or most expensive hire, or the latest software to support that. You need to be strategic about that. So go through this exercise, understand the strategies, look at your team, assess your current talent, and look at the data too. Like, what types of work are you seeing more of? What types of work is declining? What type of work are you outsourcing to counsel more? Once you do that assessment, the gaps will kind of reveal themselves, I find. And then, so from there, once you've done that diagnostic on your staffing pool as well, you'll be better prepared to kind of start filling those gaps in a way that'll accelerate realizing the objectives of the corporation. So how do you do that? There's this 3 Bs, build, borrow, and buy is what I like to say. So when, build, that means I'm referring to building your internal team. Invest some time to train your existing staff on emerging issues and trends, whether it's ESG or privacy, cybersecurity, whatever it is that's impacting your industry. Borrow, leverage your networks, reach out to your external service providers, your law firms, outside vendors. They're more than happy to, tailor a customized solution. There's secondments, there's virtual, placements that you can do. And then finally, I think the final B would be buy, but hire strategically and select expertise that's going to accelerate your strategy and the business's objectives. And I would say in terms of those 3 things, and budget opportunities, and there's implications to all of this, of course, which we'll touch on shortly, but these things work well in my experience. And if you're looking at attracting talent, you need to keep all of these things in mind, because as we noted at the outset, tomorrow's staffing and tomorrow's lawyer is looking very different. The traditional apprentice model is no longer working, and that's largely because the work that built lawyers historically is now being outsourced. It's being automated. So you need to be very deliberate about what your internal structures look like around talent recruitment, talent training, mentoring. It needs to have a little bit of structure to it, and you need to, as you said, like make time for shadowing, for mentoring, for rotations, because they're not going to necessarily have that experience through osmosis by just being around. There's things that have influenced that. Hybrid work has changed that. Automation has changed that. Pressures on time and margins, both internally and with clients. They're not willing to pay for learning curves and all that kind of thing. So the onus now shifts on the legal department to still provide that training to develop your team in a way that's going to contribute to the corporation. So I'll pause there. And Bindu, I know you feel strongly about this topic as well. So
I do, and I think there's I think you hit one piece that I'd love to dig into. So I can give an example of where we did this build, buy, or borrow analysis. We had a new regulatory sort of regime introduced, and we not only did we have to understand it as lawyers, but we also had to help our colleagues really implement it from a compliance perspective. And our dilemma was, do we simply give all of this work to external counsel because it's new to us, we don't have the internal expertise? Do we just hand it over to external lawyers to do all of this, and then we would learn after the fact? But we chose a different path, and we actually really took a number of our internal colleagues and really outsourced their day jobs to external counsel, and decided that we would that these folks were capable of learning this, because it was a new regulatory change that was kind of being learned at a similar time and pace as external counsel. It wasn't something that had been there for years and years. And so we said, well, why can't our people become the experts at it, working with external counsel in a limited capacity to really kind of do a step up on their knowledge, but for the internal team to become the experts, because this was going to be knowledge and a way of working that we needed to have on the go forward for this business, and outsource the day-to-day stuff to external counsel for a limited period of time. And for me, that was a really interesting way to think about, not just pushing it out there, but to think about how we could do development and growth opportunities for our team, for them to continue to expand their knowledge, expand their remit, their skills. Interestingly, 2 of the 3 lawyers who we became compliance professionals, because they got in so close with their business, the business really wanted them to be part of the team and in the how we implemented, not just the advisory of what we were supposed to do. So I think there's great opportunities to marry up career development along with getting the work done, and it can actually address some of the budget challenges that people have. Right, we don't always have the ability to just hire more people, and we'll talk about spend, but sometimes the budget that we have doesn't allow for us to hire kind of the right person, right, the right seniority, and so we've got to think creatively about how to do that.
yeah, just one real quick thing. Sorry, Joanne, just really quick. I think that's so important. And it's a great example, because I think really what we're seeing I'm encouraged by the stats at the beginning, because I think it's consistent, and it tells me that we're already on this path. But you historically we talk about kind of the career ladder. I think that's changing to the kind of career lattice now, right? So you're having this kind of cross-functional training is going to be critical. We heard at the outset that a lot of CLOs are already doing that. They're already being integrated in M&A and that. By implementing structures now that'll train your team to be able to do those functions more capably in the future, I think is critical, because they're not going to have that historical structure. So doing this kind of cross-functional training will help build kind of business acumen, commercial judgment, all these things that lawyers are being called upon to do. So again, we're looking at that mindset shift. There's a lot of shifts happening. So getting ahead of it proactively, I think, is critical. And that's a great example that you offered, Bindu.
So if 50% are our greatest challenge is around budget, let's get to it, shall we? Because I also have a great question that I received. I want to make sure we save time for, but this is a really important conversation because of all the best laid plans. And if you don't get budget to move your case forward, that can be obviously a challenge. So some wisdom from you both, please.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I want to leave some time for discussion as well. But I think it's really about kind of reframing the discussion and how you approach budget when you're presenting making your pitch. You need to present your ask or the transformation or the investment that you're looking for as an investment in the business, as essential infrastructure to accelerate and achieve the objectives of the business. And tie the budget to measurable KPIs and measurable goals, right? So the way to justify it is, if you're asking for budget to purchase new software, contract management software, demonstrate why this is important for the business. This new software has allowed us to reduce contract time by 40%, which unlocks revenue for the business of X dollars year over year, whatever the case may be. But you need to start speaking in that language. So we're back to speaking the language of the business, demonstrating the value, demonstrating the significance. The other thing that has worked historically is identify, once you've done your rounds, you've connected with your colleagues, who's working on what, approach them about co-funding, right? If historically some departments have access to greater budget than the legal will, but that won't happen to you because you're doing your business plan at the outset now, and you're earmarking and asking for these things. But if it's still not there, look at your finance department, look at procurement, look at IT. What types of budgets do they have? Often you'll have similar pain points, similar benefits from investing in certain measures. So look at whether there's any shared opportunities for costs and benefits there. And then the final thing I'll say, and I'll let Bindi chime in too, is here's your chance to kind of be creative and be a storyteller, right? So it kind of comes full circle. Demonstrate why that's important, demonstrate your value, demonstrate how this fits into the larger picture. And you need to position legal and your budget as a growth enabler. So keep all of those buzzwords in your mind when you're structuring your budget, asking for money. All of those things will make I don't know if it'll necessarily move the needle and result in a check, but it'll make it a little bit more persuasive and a little easier.
Absolutely. I want to pick up on two things. So the have courage to make tough decisions is a point that I don't think we should not cover in this session. Just because that's what the legal department did before, that's just because those people have done that function doesn't mean that that's right going forward. And that is brutal, right? You might be impacting people's roles or jobs. People can evolve their jobs to maybe move from a particular kind of work to another. But if they don't want to, you may not have the luxury with your limited budget to be able to meet the needs of the organization as it goes forward with the folks who want or can only do work of a particular vintage. And I'm not advocating for, letting people go, but sometimes those are the pieces. Sometimes we may have to let go of some of the budget, buckets that for a particular year or 2 years for things that we liked doing and that were nice to have. I mean, I think as in-house departments, we are very lucky to have so many external firms like Dentons and many others who, will help us give access to research pieces, will train us. Like, do we need to pay for those things to maybe repurpose that budget for something else that's really important to kind of move the dial on the department? And so I think really thinking about the resources that you have and not allowing for there to be too many sacred buckets of spend, and these decisions aren't necessarily, if I change the approach or the purpose now, that it has to be like that forever. Maybe we just are taking a pause on this for a period of time. And then the second point I would make, and I know we're almost at time, is as if you are part of an organization where there's a more established sort of project or budget process for new initiatives, please make sure as the legal department that you are earmarking, that you are making sure that you are putting a chip in for needing resources to fund the project. I think too often lawyers just take the view that they can just absorb the work into their day, and what it does is it in some ways diminishes the contributions of the legal department, because we're not saying that it's going to cost this much money, but every one of our colleagues across the organization does. They can tell you it's going to take a 0.25 of an FTE to be able to support this initiative over the next year. And why do we as lawyers not put in for that? So, when everybody else is asking for money, do not decline the opportunity. Jump right in there, because maybe that creates some capacity somewhere else that you could use. So, take the opportunities where you can.
And I think there's sort of a point that we talked about yesterday, and we don't need to get into it in detail today, but just around, asking, your law firms, right? There's access to resources as well that,
Yep.
that we may have that, that might be helpful to you, whether whether that's even helping on design the business case for some of these things. By the way, I've done a
Yeah.
whole session on how to create a business case, and that piece around storytelling and positioning and as an investment, and what is the risk of not proceeding is a great question to be
Yes.
asking. But my point being there, how can we provide support for these kinds of conversations, I think is a great one as well. Now, I have a question that I was sent, and I want to make sure we had time to address, because I think it was a great question. So how have you, in your experience, dealt with members who may be a bit cynical and think that some of these small but important shifts are just, I'll use the words directly, corporate mumbo jumbo? So, in other words, talking about mindset shifts and strategy and culture and all those things. So what are your thoughts on how to deal with some of those resistors?
Should I go first, or do you want to take it, Vindy? I can.
Well, listen, I have met many of them over the years. And I would say, understand, I think having some empathy around probably the emotional origins of that, right? So a resistance or perhaps fear of change and what this means. I think the cynicism sometimes comes from long tenure and having seen, the corporate flavors of the month, kind of ebb and flow in their cycle. It's centralized, decentralized, the jargon and all of those pieces. But I think really trying to drive the team towards and making it very clear, I think, in that vision and mission and the culture of how we're going to behave and how we're going to approach work and our colleagues. That's attitudinal, and I think it's very much the role of the leader to make it clear that that's an expectation. And if people can't meet the expectations, it's not just about being a good lawyer, but it's also about being a great colleague. I think hard decisions have to be, and sometimes, cultures change in an organization, they change in particular teams, and you can either look for ways to embrace it, or you may need to find a place where you can, exactly as you are, be successful. So that's a courageous decision, I guess, but I'm not sure we all have the luxury in this day and age, or frankly should, just to be stuck in the place that we're at.
I'd say like change is difficult, particularly for legacy employees who have been there for a while. And this is the way we've always done it. And you're coming in here speaking all this mumbo jumbo about culture change and collective mind growth and and it all sounds very woo-woo. And that's true, but it might be the case. But I would say in that scenario, you've got to unpack and separate kind of the process from the outcome, right? And that's, again, you're coming full circle back to the strategic objectives. I can call it collective mind, collective mind shift. I can call it whatever I want in terms of the process. That's not the relevant piece. The relevant piece is the alignment with the end goal outcome that we're all looking to achieve. So how we get there is going to be flexible and agile, and it'll ebb and flow. So unpack really what the resistance to that is, to these naysayers, and understand that, I would say, is a good way to kind of diffuse that.
That was
It's a great question. Thank you so much for the ask. If there are any other questions, happy to take it, but maybe we'll just flip to our last poll to get a sense from everyone, because I think there's, we talk about the relationship between the law department and your internal colleagues, and how important it is for you to be strategic, to be partnered, to be aligned, just as much as we are as a law firm, and want to be aligned with you so that we can together support the ultimate client who we all are here to serve. And so love to hear from you. Any ideas in terms of what's the most valuable way to help you with your legal transformation? Is it more tech and tools? Is it more training, different service models? Well, I see one in the chat, proactive legislation monitoring. Thanks for that. That's a great suggestion. And we had a comment in the chat that they would like to do another hour. So guess what, everybody? We're sticking on for another hour. We had no plans.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you,
there's
everyone.
No shortage of things to talk about, for sure.
We you know what? I'm hopeful that we can take the content that we didn't have time to discuss today, but we have in our notes, and share with you something a little bit more robust by way of a piece of article or checklist or something. So stay tuned. More to come. Thank you, everyone. Niamh, we'll turn it back to you.
Great. So I am just going to share the poll results with everyone as we conclude today's more training and another hour of chat, which sounds fantastic. I want to say lots of great sessions coming up. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone for your engagement today. Thank you for joining us for this hour. We have lots of great sessions on the way, so we're looking forward to having you back on with us again. And then finally, I want to say a massive thank you to our panel today for the time, thought and consideration they put into today's session. That concludes this afternoon's webinar, so we will see you online again soon. Thank you.